Okay, hi. Chris, thanks for setting me up. Hello, I'm Nader Talai. I'm going to talk about WIP limits, which we, as some of you who were in the previous session have just learned, is one of the enabling constraints for Kanban. So I'm going to talk about why do we multitask. So I've done this a few times. So I'm going to ask for you to tell me why you multitask, and I'm going to write it down. My handwriting isn't brilliant, but I'm sure we can read it. So if you can just shout out, why do we multitask?
Because we think it's a good idea.
Good idea, yeah.
Too much work, not enough time.
Too much time, yep.
Because you can honestly answer, I'm working on it, and that means people shut up.
Yep.
Because it can free up more people than just yourself.
It can free up what, sorry?
Well, it can free up other people. Right?
Free up other people. Okay.
Tasks can be boring at times.
It could be
boring.
tasking is boring.
Yeah.
Yep. Task could be boring, yep. Sure. Anything else?
Because we think we should.
We should, yeah, because we think we should.
Changing priorities.
Change priorities, yep.
Keeping busy or waiting for things to happen.
Keeping busy. Shout it out. Don't. If you wait for me to come to you, they won't. They just somebody else will.
I was going to say you're blocked. Yeah, it was blocked on something.
Blocked on something. Yeah.
Sometimes more than one thing has to get done.
Yeah. Sometimes more than one thing needs to be done. Okay. And we can do a few more, but I think that's pretty much it. So if you were going to look at those and see what are the key things, I mean, if obviously I have a bias because I've already done some of this stuff. So it looks like a lot of the time we're doing multitasking because we think we can get more done. It's easier for us to say yes than say no. I'm too busy, and say, yeah, it's in progress, so people can leave us alone, and then we can get on with what we were doing, and priorities changing, so people saying, don't do this, do that. So we kind of do a lot of that stuff. And when we do it, let me just turn this on. When we do it, we always do it because we think that we get more done by multitasking. Every time we multitask, we have a belief that it will be, we can get it done quicker. I can do more things at once. I can keep three balls juggling at the same time. People will be happy because I tell them I've started it. And they go back and they come back later and say, where are you? I say, well, it's in progress. And they come back again, I say it's in progress. And then somebody else comes in, so I've got to start theirs. So for me, it distills down to, we have a belief that we multitask because we can get more done. And it turns out that actually that's not correct. Because people who've looked at this, they say that actually we are deluding ourselves. When we multitask and we believe that we can get more done, that's just a delusion. Studies show that multitasking does not deliver more. And it delivers significantly less. There's also other research that is done to say the impact of multitasking on our brains, if you like. So when we are multitasking, as you can see, we've got to burn a lot of energy, and switching tasks causes that to happen. So we can also see the impact of it that it has on the IQ. These are part of the research that has been done in UK. Actually, the paper is from Australia, but the research was done in UK. And you can see that our IQ is also affected. When you're multitasking, you are actually as if you're under the influence of drugs, more than that. So there you go. So we do multitasking because we think we can get more done and be more effective. What it turns out that actually multitasking is counterintuitive. It is not actually delivering more, but it keeps people happy. We're all happier. We all want to be busy. We're all been trained as managers and as people who work with systems that managers control that, you know, being busy is good. You know, if you're busy, people leave you alone. They only come to you when you're sitting there and say, well, why aren't you doing something? Here's something for you to get going with. And it just makes it worse. But that's what we've learned, so we want to keep busy. So this is what research has shown, that we actually lose about 40% of our productivity when we multitask. And it's worse when we do more than 2 things. Up to 2 things you can just about manage. As soon as you go beyond 2, it gets really, really bad. So there you go. We are 40% less productive, but we do it because we think we're going to get more done. So I'm going to show you this little clip. Be interesting. I think I clipped. Okay, so this is a bit of. Have we got audio on here? Is there an audio line here? Is that audio? Looks like it. It's going to be interesting. Tell you what, let's unplug that, plug this in. And play that little clip. So some of you may have already seen this, I hope. Can you hear it? I don't think anybody can hear it. Okay, let's unplug it. I just play it as it is. So this is a clip from I Love Lucy. So they're wrapping chocolates, as you can see. Supervisor is going to come in. Okay, so that's what happens when we hide errors. And a lot of the times, because of our, if you like, our trained behavior or our past experience, we hide errors. Oh, actually, hang on a minute. I think I made a mistake here. I think the YouTube is still playing something. Let's kill that off, whatever that is.
This is Lucille Desiree Ball, the most successful female comedian.
Thank you very much. Could have been something worse. Let's get back to the slides. We've got something there. Slideshow. Continue for current slide. Good. Okay, so there was a little bit of fun, but it actually shows that when we hide problems, actually gets worse. And as the number of work in progress increases, the stress in the system gets higher, the error rate goes higher, and the more we hide, the worse it becomes because, you know, to the external people, they give us more work. So in physical work, or when you're working on physical goods, it's a little bit easier to see the problem because you can see the chocolate pie. I mean, if you were actually observing them for a bit rather than just coming in bungee jumping episodically, you will actually see that there are lots of chocolate not being wrapped. They have to eat some of it or discard some of it. But with knowledge work, it's impossible to see what's going on. We cannot see what's going on. So one of the things we have to do is make that work visible. You know, so that's the challenge that we have, is that we need to make work visible. And it's like all work, you know, there's always a balance to be made between the demand and our capacity and capability to service that demand. And we need to sort of say, okay, when do we start something? Why do we start it? And defer commitment to starting it. Not everything needs to be started there and then, but we just need to do it knowing what is our capability as a team. And the other thing that we have with knowledge work is that we have far too much variability. If you're wrapping sweets or most linear, simple, mechanical work, it's deterministic in nature. You can time it and you can get steps and say, this step, it takes so much, so much, so much, so much. And you can drive a system where you want to minimize variation and get a consistent throughput using the knowledge that you have. With knowledge work, is difficult. We don't have that advantage. Hopefully. So for that reason alone, and for a lot of variability, we need to limit the work in process, which is a way that allows us to trade off a bit of work. If you like, we create buffers that we have some work to do for flow. So otherwise, we'll end up with a system. If one piece flow, in other words, finishing one thing, starting the next one, doesn't work for knowledge work because there is too much variation in the steps that we carry out, and that will lead to too much starvation within the system. So a lot of the time, things are not happening because we have to wait for things to finish. So that's why we need WIP limits. So we need to create a way that we trade off an optimal flow and put up with some degree of work in process. This is the reason. This is just from these are. I'll build it up and then we'll sort of talk about it. So these are actual results from a customer. Doesn't really matter who, but this is the problem. We have this long variation. There's a long tail, and if you look at these numbers, the variation is from 6 days to 29 days is a lot. We can go and pretend that we can do it in 6 days. Reality is that only a quarter of the time we can do that. If we wanted to get more certainty, we go towards 29 or 30 days or whatever, any number in these ranges. So to allow for that variation to happen, we need to create a buffer of work that if things go fast, yep, I get it done. If they go slow, that's okay. There is, I'm not going to get, my system is not going to get overly stressed. There is some work, it can wait in that buffer, and then I'll pull it in when I'm ready to go. So that's basically the key reason that we create WIP limits and we create buffers to make sure we get optimal flow through our system. And is an enabling constraint, as Chris told us earlier. I've already spoken about that. And WIP limits are essential to create a pull system. We cannot have a pull system unless you have a WIP limit. Without WIP limits, it is a push-based system. If work just comes in and you push it into your system, you do not have a pull system. You need WIP limits to create a pull system. Okay? I'm not going to read those things because you know it, but this is a picture of the mental overload. This is what happens when we have a lot of work in process. We do it anyway. You're sitting here, you may be thinking about email you received or what you need to do when you go back and other things that we're doing. So when we add on top of that to the work that we're juggling, it just becomes harder and harder. So the reason, when we reduce WIP, work in process, it's counterintuitive that we actually deliver more. Now, some of you may have been, I can't remember everybody who was in Klaus's session yesterday, the workshop that he ran. Now, we did For those of you who weren't there, we just built some boats, paper boats, if you like. First round, we just pushed them through as fast as possible. We wanted. The second round, we introduced WIP limits, just finish one piece before you get the next one. What do you think was the effect of that on the number of boats that we managed to make per minute? The first round versus the second round. Thank you. Yeah, I'll have plenty of time left, don't worry. So you would, counterintuitively, and even though I've done it, the same exercise before, but when you're in it, you kind of say, oh yeah, round one, we must have created more. We must have produced more boats because things were going as fast as possible. Actually, when we looked at the numbers, what we delivered from round one and round two per minute was the same. We produced 5 boats per minute on average on boat rounds. The difference, though, was the lead time, the time that you had to wait for a boat to come off the line. It sort of went from, I can't remember the numbers, but it was around 4 minutes or something. It went down to about a minute. So it improved in one of the teams by a factor of 4, and the other one was a factor of 2 or something like that. So that's what WIP limits do. It is counterintuitive. When we reduce WIP, we reduce wait time and we increase the flow efficiency, and that's why we are making those trade-offs by putting those buffers in there. There is a bit of work that we are going to build a buffer for, but that's a trade-off we're making to increase the flow. So, before I jump to the next slide, how many of you use WIP limits? Any of you use it? Okay. And what do you use to limit WIP? You can shout out whatever. How do you limit it?
Number of stories under a certain part of the flow at any one time.
So number of stories per board, per state, per person?
So per state.
Per state, okay. All right. Any other ways? Sorry?
Cards per team.
Cards per person, yeah. Cards. Team member. Any other ways? No? Okay, those are pretty good ways. And how many times, how good are you at honoring your WIP limits? That's the question. Or if I asked it in a negative way, how many times do you bust the limit?
5 to 10%.
5 to 10%. Okay, so you pretty much honor it all the time. The other teams, the other people who said they have WIP limits, do you stick with them all the time?
Actually, no, we make a conscious decision when the team wants to break the WIP limit.
Yeah.
They do it, but only if they talk to each other about it. They can't break it.
Yeah. Okay. So you break it, but you say you have an explicit policy for breaking.
Yeah. It's
Policy for breaking limits. Yeah. That's fair enough. So the rest of you either don't have WIP limits, or if you do have them, you adhere to them pretty much all the time. My experience is actually when we introduce WIP limits, very few teams stick with it. They will break it. They break it. They find it very hard to work within the WIP limits. That's partly because they want to be busy. They find, they find satisfaction in being busy. And if they're not busy, they feel like they're not doing work, or the manager or somebody else will come and say, do this, do that. So one way, and it's not the only way, one way that some of the people I work with, they have created work. They call it chair spinning. You can call it whatever you want. Improvement work that is for the person to do. So when we are limited by the WIP, we have also chair spinning tasks or improvement tasks that, if you like, which the person can do without impacting the rest of the team. So there is a backlog, it's known, it's explicit. You know, you don't just sit there and do nothing. And you can, I mean, those things you can be, I want to read a book, I want to learn about this thing, or I want to improve these things. You know, the way, I don't know, we have this problem in this system and I want to spend some time exploring how to fix it. So those are known tasks, they're part of your options of work to do, and you can pull in on those. That sort of helps the people who feel, well, I must be busy, I have to do something, and it's not possible for them to sort of move from, because one of the things that we do with the teams when you want to go to a pull-based system is to move from the thinking that I am done to we are done. The work is more important than what the individual contribution to the work is. And that takes some time for people to appreciate that there is something you can do downstream to help people, or even upstream to make it ready so that it's in a better state to flow. So you need to work with that system, keep reminding people that your work is done, yes, it's good, but it's not enough. What we do need to do is to make sure that the work goes all the way down and gets done. And that takes time. But if you're in a situation where people just can't do it, then you can sort of choose some of those options. So some of the ways we limit work, I think you've already mentioned it, some of those, but those are some of the other options, yeah? Per board, per person, you know, you can have avatars, you can have time boxes, you know, like Pomodoro kind of thing. And the only one I have, so I will make, the only one that is something that people may not have come across is the token one. And I mean, it's like avatars, but it may be different kind of tokens. So I've got a little simulation for that. There's nothing magical about that. So you have these tokens that sort of, you can only use work when there is one of those, and you attach it to a piece of work, it gets done, and that's it. That's it. So, you know, nothing magical. Oops, let's go back. So as work goes through, you attach work, and when it gets done, you bring it back so the token is free. There is a variation of this that those of you who know Tameflow uses 2 tokens per piece of work to sort of show flow of work up to the constraint and flow of the work downstream from the constraint. So both tokens need to be free for you to actually start work. But that's a simple, and avatars are a way of doing that, although they are very personal. This is just saying, you know, it's not a person, this is just tokens that you can use. Pomodoro is just another way of limiting work. You know, I mean, those of you, I'm pretty sure everybody knows what Pomodoro technique is. 25 minutes, 5 minutes, you don't know? Okay, so it's an egg timer. So created by an Italian student, was revising for his exams, and he couldn't concentrate. And then he realized actually that if he breaks his time into 25-minute chunks, and he focuses, he can do that, and then he can take a 5-minute break. So he came up with this technique, which is, and he had a timer, egg timer, or whatever, tomato timer in his kitchen. It was Italian, so they call it Pomodoro technique. So that's what it is. You typically what you do, you take 5 minutes for every 25 minutes. Every 4, you take a longer break, like an hour or whatever. And most of the time that ends up like lunchtime anyway. So you know, you take a longer break, and then you do another 4, and it's evening to go home, kind of thing. So that's another way of limiting what you do, because you say, I'm going to focus on this thing, I'm going to finish it, I'm not going to do anything else. We do this kind of thing. You know, we do focused work all the time when you are, for example, when you're going on holiday, just before you go on holiday, we are very, very selective about what we take on. We don't multitask. We focus on what can be done in the time that we got allowed to do, and we defer stuff. So, well, this can wait till I come back from holiday. This cannot wait. I need to, but it's too long. I need to find somebody to do it while I'm away, and we do it. So when we want to be highly effective, we limit our WIP. Normal day, today work, where we should be effective, we don't do it. We kind of just go to the norm. We say, oh yeah, let's juggle as many balls as we can. So if you want to be effective, you need to do more on limiting your WIP. So one of the other things, the other concepts is about where do we spend the time. So when we want to be effective, a lot of the time what happens is that our natural tendency is to look at when we are busy and try and optimize how we are busy. When we're working on something, we try and say, how can I work better? Yes, there is some optimization we can do in there, but we can gain a lot more out of our system of work if we look at the times that we are not working, when we are waiting, when we are either waiting for somebody else or another team. When we are idling, there are great opportunities for improving how we work. And that's one of the things about understanding how we work and the flow efficiency. So wait times are key. Focus on the wait times, and then you can improve the efficiency of your system. So a few years back, Håkon Fors and Jolt came up with these Lean Agile Scotland. I think that's been mentioned a couple of times already, hasn't it? So if you don't know, Chris runs that conference. Please sign up if you haven't done so. Thank you. Come and see me or Chris, actually, and then they can tell you how to sign up, where to sign up. So flow efficiency is the thing that they came up with, and most of us use it now. Work time over lead time, so the total completion time over the amount of time that we're working. So basically, we are trying to see how much of the total time is wait, and then focus on reducing the wait time. Most of the time, your focus is on the doing time, and that doesn't give you as much improvement in your overall system of work. Whereas if you work on the wait time, the gains you get are huge. So some examples, these are real examples. So this is from a company. So the wait times, these are between departments. So this is a portfolio of work where projects go from one team to the other, and teams are not within the same department. This is going from like commercial to sales to marketing to technology. And as you can see, there's a fair bit of time, 41 days just waiting between departments. I mean, between these green bits, there's waiting there as well, but for this particular organization and setup, we didn't even bother to measure that bit. You know, so even when a team is working on it, there's still wait time there, but this is just going from one silo to another, because when it goes to somebody else's input queue, their priorities are not aligned with yours, so it might be priority 1 for you, but it might be priority 10 for them. So it will just wait until they get round to it, or they get interrupted because somebody says, do this one for me, please. So yours gets pushed down, and then somebody else, and then eventually they come round. Anyway, so those are the stats that you can see. So it's quite important. If you look at the wait times, you can get a lot of efficiencies out of it. So a few years back, Larry Mascherone and Rally Software, I think CA Agile now, they did some studies on the impact of working process limits, and this is a you can get the study there, but this is it. You can see the time in process for stories goes up as the WIP limit is going up. As you can see, the trend is upwards. So the amount of time that it takes us for us to do work is going up. So we think we are more productive, but we actually get less productive. Quality is also kind of the same way, impacted the same way. The more we juggle, the more stressful we are, the chances of defect goes up. Predictability kind of is not really affected that much, but as you can see, it's there. It does get worse, but it's slower creep as the others. You can get full list of, so you can get a full list of the survey here, and there are sort of playlists that Larry has done, short, couple of minutes, I think, videos on them, and this is like an hour or 50 minutes. There you go. It's a good thing I wrote the notes so you can look at it. If you do go and implement WIP limits, I mean, is a more than WIP to Kanban method, but WIP limits is quite important part of it, because one of the things that WIP limits produce for you is slack time to say, when you have spare time, so you haven't got anything to do, you start thinking and you start retrospecting. How can I improve the way I am working or we are working? and that provides you options and time for improving. These are some of the wider results for this is a 3-year, this is from a customer on a 3-year journey. This is how, I think somebody asked in the previous session, I don't know whether they're still here. So we were engaged to improve the IT part of it, just do the build part, make it go faster. And yes, we did. But by doing that, we also gained enough credibility within the organization to start addressing the wider system of work. So we had a narrow focus, and then we managed to widen it. And as you can see, over 3 years, the impact is quite huge. From the, just the build side or the IT side, gone from 90 to 40. Well, that's good, but that's just like a 2 times improvement. But if you look at the total time, 400 days down to 90, that's over 4 times improvement. So that's one of the reasons that you want to look at a system as a whole where you can, but you may have to gain the trust first before you can go. This is another organization. So these are just, this is the failure demand. So failure demand, for those of you who may not be familiar with the term, is any work you do that doesn't meet the requirements of the customer. So that could be you delivered the story, but it's not quite complete. You misunderstood something, you got to add something. That to me is failure demand. Defects obviously are failure demand. So any work that we could have done when we had, of course, I'm not asking you to have a crystal ball to read somebody's mind, but if they said, I want this, and you didn't deliver it, then that's failure demand. And if you look at that, that's also, this is a 6 months, this is a team of around 10 people. Within 6 months, they changed from that to that. Again, by focusing on limiting the work and the other elements of the Kanban system. But it started with limiting work and visualization. I think we've already spoken about this. What are the benefits? The key benefits are time to market. You reduce time to market. You improve your delivery rate and pride of workmanship. People are happier working in systems like that. I think we are at the end. Yeah, that's just the advertising, so don't worry about that. So questions? Any questions?
What are the typical flow efficiencies?
The flow efficiencies?
You see that what are the typical?
So the actual examples, these are, both of these, but this one in particular, that's a real customer. So that's a real customer. So you can see, and as I said, we're not even looking at the green bits. This is just a wait between departments. So that's still a lot of wait time. And when you improve it, it goes up by a factor. Factors of 2 within 3 months are typical. If you focus on the wait time, you can get about, reduce the wait time by half within 3 months or so. It depends on the size of the organization and also whether they want to make the improvements. But if you've got commitment from the team to do it, it can be done. Anything else?
What are the most common WIP limit types that you see on the list that you showed?
Yeah, the most common one is per column, basically per column. And of course, Scrum does per board. Sorry, you have a question.
Is there a way to predict what good work it might be as a starter?
Predict the
starting WIP limit.
Oh, I see.
Start out there and evaluate
Yeah.
it.
Sure. So my preferred way is to let the system work and then measure what comes out and limit it that way. But pretty much a lot of guidance I hear from people is look at the number of people you have, just go 1.5 times or twice per person, and that's a good starting point. And then you can sort of go from there. To be honest, it doesn't really matter what you do, provided you look at it and you keep evolving your system. Because the reason you're doing it is because you want some outcomes, which is reduce the lead time, improve your delivery rate, and then as you get those things or you don't get those things, start looking at it. Anything else? Thank you. Thanks.